The phone buzzed against the laminate counter, right as I was trying to explain to a guy why we couldn't get the alternator for his old Buick by tomorrow. I ignored it, but then it buzzed again, and again, a rhythmic tapping that felt like it was drilling into my wrist. When I finally swiped the screen, it was a notification from the school's parent portal. Contact information updated, I frowned. I'm the one who usually handles the logistics for Kenneth, the school runs, the permission slips, the frantic emails about forgotten gym shoes. I've been doing it since Terry and I married 4 years ago, though I'm well aware that on the official paperwork, I'm just the stepmother. The real authority stays with Terry and his ex, Kelly. I don't mind the lack of a title as long as the day-to-day actually works. I opened the app and scrolled down to the emergency contact list. My name had been moved. I wasn't the primary contact for afternoon pickups anymore. I'd been bumped to third, below Terry and Kelly. There was no note, no heads-up text, just a digital shift. I didn't say anything until Terry got home. He looked exhausted, the kind of gray-faced tired he gets when the credit union is pushing loan processors through a quarterly audit. He dropped his keys on the entryway table and started heading for the fridge. Why did the school app say the contact info changed? I asked. Terry stopped with his hand on the refrigerator door. He didn't look at me. What app? The portal. I got an alert. I'm not the first contact for pickups anymore. He sighed, a long sound that made him seem older than 45. Oh, yeah, Kelly and I talked. She wanted to simplify things for the spring. It just makes more sense for the school to call the biological parents first. Since when? A few days ago. I handled it. I didn't think it was a big deal. It's a big deal if I'm the one driving him to soccer, I said. If the school calls you first and you're in a meeting, and then they call Kelly, and she's at the vet clinic, I'm the one who ends up guessing where the kid is. Terry finally looked at me, his expression flat. It's just a list. Jamie, I'm trying to keep things smooth with Kelly so we don't have a blow-up every time there's a schedule change. You know how she gets. He was good at that. The keeping the peace angle. He'd spent years navigating Kelly's moods to make sure he didn't lose access to Kenneth or some future grandchild, and I usually let it slide because I didn't want to be the reason for a fight. But seeing my name pushed down the list felt like a quiet erasure. Fine, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. If you've got a system with her that works better, then you two handle it. All of it. The portal, the emails, the permission slips. I'm done being the backup who does the actual work. Terry blinked, looking surprised that I was actually pushing back. You're just going to stop helping with the school stuff. If I'm not the primary contact, I'm not the primary coordinator, I told him. You figure it out with her. I turned and walked into the kitchen to start the pasta, leaving him standing by the open fridge. I could hear him shift his weight, maybe start to say something, but then he just closed the door. The only sound in the room was the heavy, rhythmic thumping of the dishwasher, starting up in the next room. The following Tuesday, I was at the elementary school to pick up Kenneth early for a dentist appointment. The office smelled like floor wax and old sneakers, and Mrs. Gable, the secretary, was behind the plexiglass, sorting through a stack of neon-colored flyers. She looked up and gave me a tight, professional smile. "Oh, Jamie, just the person," she said, reaching for a manila folder. "I've got the permission slip for the 4th grade trip to the science center. Terry mentioned you'd handle the portal payment and the lunch waiver." I stopped mid-stride. "The science center? When is that?" Mrs. Gable paused, her pen hovering over a checklist. "Next Friday." The buses leave at 9. Terry said you two had already talked about it and that you were on top of the logistics. I felt a hot, prickly sensation crawl up the back of my neck. I hadn't talked about any science center. I hadn't even seen a flyer in Kenneth's backpack, though I'd checked it twice that morning. Terry had handled it, which, in his world, meant he'd agreed to the trip with Kelly, confirmed it with the school, and then outsourced the actual execution to me without mentioning it existed. I didn't know about the trip, I said. I tried to keep my voice level, but it came out thin. Mrs. Gable blinked, her expression shifting to that look of mild pity people give when they think there's a communication breakdown in a complicated family. Oh, I'm sorry. Terry was very clear that it was all set. He just said, you'd be the one to click the approve button on the portal since you usually manage the account. Right, I said. I'll look into it. I didn't ask her when the deadline was or how much the trip cost. I just took the slip of paper and walked out to the curb where Kenneth was waiting. He looked happy, swinging his backpack, completely unaware that he was the center of a silent tug-of-war. Are we going to the science center? He asked as he climbed into the car. I don't know, Ken. Did your dad tell you? He said maybe. He said he had to check with Mom first. I stared at the windshield. Terry had told the school it was all set and that I was on top of it, but he'd told the 9-year-old it was a maybe pending Kelly's approval. He was playing both sides, presenting a united, organized front to the institution while keeping the actual decision-making in a private loop with his ex-wife. I spent the rest of the drive to the dentist thinking about the boundary I'd set in the kitchen. I'm done being the backup, who does the actual work, but standing there in the office, I realized how that looked to the outside world. To Mrs. Gable, I wasn't a woman reclaiming her time. I was just the helper who had forgotten the instructions. When I got home that afternoon, the permission slip was sitting on the kitchen island. I didn't put it in the to-do pile. I didn't log into the portal. I didn't even put it in Terry's briefcase. I just left it there, face up, right next to the fruit bowl. Terry came in around 5:30, humming something under his breath, looking far more relaxed than a man who had just outsourced a school trip without a conversation. He set his bag down and glanced at the counter. He saw the slip, but he didn't pick it up. He just leaned over and kissed my cheek. How was the dentist? He asked. Fine, I said, moving past him to start the laundry. Mrs. Gable says you've got the science center all figured out. Terry paused, his hand still on the counter. Oh yeah, it should be a great trip for him. Great, I said. I'll leave the portal payment to you then. He frowned, a small crease appearing between his eyebrows. Wait, I thought you had the login saved on your phone? I do, I said, not looking back. But you're the one who handled the setup. The rest of the week at the shop was a blur of back-ordered gaskets and a delivery driver who kept leaving the pallets in the wrong bay. I liked the shop. I liked that when a part didn't fit, there was a tangible reason for it. A wrong year, a different engine trim, a manufacturing error. You could hold the mistake in your hand and show it to the customer. You didn't have to guess why the part was wrong. The specs told you. When I got home on Thursday, the house felt heavy. Terry was in the living room with Kenneth, and for a moment, I just watched them from the hallway. Terry was sitting on the floor with a notebook spread out, explaining long division to Kenneth. He was patient, his voice low and steady, breaking the numbers down into small, manageable chunks. He was a lone processor. He lived in a world of decimals and interest rates, and he had a way of making the math feel like a puzzle instead of a chore. Kenneth was actually listening, leaning in, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was a good scene, the kind of father-son moment that usually made me feel like the blended family thing was actually working. But as soon as Kenneth headed to the bathroom, Terry looked up and saw me. The patience vanished, replaced by a look of strained frustration. "I can't get into the portal," he said. "The password you used doesn't work. I tried the one from the email, and I tried the one we used for the library, and nothing." "Maybe you typed it in wrong," I said, walking into the kitchen to put my bag on the counter. "I didn't type it in wrong, Jamie. I've tried it 4 times. Just give me the current login." I stopped and looked at him. "I told you. If you're handling the arrangements, you handle the access. I'm not the secretary for your conversations with Kelly." Terry stood up, rubbing the back of his neck. "This isn't about being a secretary. It's about a $10 fee for a science center trip. Why are we doing this? Just tell me the password so the kid can go on the trip." "It's not about the $10, I said. "It's about the fact that you told the school I was on top of it while you were making deals behind my back. If you want to be the primary contact, be the primary contact. That includes knowing how to log in." "I don't have time to reset the whole account and verify the email," he snapped. "I've had a brutal week. I just want this done." "Then you should have mentioned the trip on Tuesday," I replied. I didn't feel proud of it. I felt petty. I knew exactly where the password was, saved in a secure folder on my phone that I'd organized 3 years ago. I could have given it to him in 5 seconds and ended the tension. But the image of Mrs. Gable's pitying smile was still stuck in my head, and I wanted Terry to feel the friction of the system he'd built. I wanted him to experience the gap between handling it and actually doing it. Terry stared at me for a long second, his jaw tight. He didn't argue further, but he didn't apologize either. He just turned back to the notebook on the floor. "Kenneth," he called out, "get your shoes on. We're going to the store to get those poster boards for your project." He didn't ask if I wanted to come. He didn't ask if I'd already bought the boards. He just took the lead, steering Kenneth toward the door. As they left, I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing, and the house went suddenly, sharply quiet. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the permission slip, still sitting there by the fruit bowl. I had successfully drawn a line, but as I sat there in the silence, I realized I hadn't actually solved anything. I had just stopped the labor, which left the problem exactly where it had started, with a 9-year-old who didn't know if he was going on a field trip, and a husband who thought I was being difficult over a password. I stayed in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, waiting for the sound of the car pulling back into the driveway. Friday morning arrived with the kind of frantic energy that usually makes me the engine of the house. I woke up early, my mind already running through the checklist. Brown bag lunch, the extra water bottle Kenneth likes, and the science center permission slip that was still sitting on the counter. A small white flag of a truce that neither of us had actually signed. I stayed in bed for an extra 10 minutes, listening to Terry and Kenneth in the hallway. I could hear the low rumble of Terry's voice and the sharp, excited interruptions of a 9-year-old. I felt a strange, cold knot in my stomach. I wanted to be the one to make sure the lunch was packed, but I was trying to hold on to the line I'd drawn. If I stepped in now, the password standoff would have been for nothing. When I finally walked into the kitchen, the atmosphere was brittle. Terry was leaning against the counter, staring at his phone with a look of profound annoyance. Kenneth was already dressed, eating a bowl of cereal with a level of intensity that suggested he was trying to power himself up for the day. Is he all set? I asked, reaching for the coffee pot. Terry didn't look up. Yeah, he's set. How? I didn't see you log into the portal. I called the office, Terry said, his voice flat. I had to spend 20 minutes on hold with Mrs. Gable and then another 10 minutes arguing with Kelly about whose account the fee should come out of. I handled it over the phone. He sounded exhausted, but there was a trace of resentment in his tone, as if my refusal to give him a password had personally caused the bureaucratic nightmare of a school office on a Friday morning. He'd solved the problem, but he'd done it the hard way, and he wanted me to know it. Good, I said. I'm glad it's sorted. I started packing Kenneth's lunch anyway. I couldn't help it. I didn't want him to go to the science center with a half-empty bag of pretzels. As I tucked a juice box into the side pocket, Terry cleared his throat. By the way, he said, finally looking at me, Kelly's picking him up from the science center today. She's taking him straight to that aquarium thing in Appleton for the weekend. I stopped with the sandwich halfway into the bag. What? What do you mean? What? I took the afternoon off, Terry. I told my boss on Tuesday that I had to be at the school by 3 to get him. Terry blinked, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face. I didn't know you took the afternoon off. Kelly mentioned she wanted to do the aquarium, and I told her it was fine. I figured you were working anyway. I told you on Tuesday that I was handling the dentist and the school runs this week, I said, my voice rising. You said you were done with the school stuff, he countered. You told me to handle the arrangements, so I did. I arranged it with Kelly. I stared at him. He had taken what I was willing to do, my attempt to stop being the invisible labor, and used it as a license to erase me from the schedule entirely. He hadn't just handled the payment. He had promised away a piece of my time and my relationship with Kenneth without a single text to check if I was available. He'd treated my withdrawal of labor as a withdrawal of presence. I didn't mean I wanted to be a stranger to the kid's schedule, I said. I meant I didn't want to be the only one doing the work while you make the decisions in secret. Terry sighed and checked his watch. Look, it's already decided. The school knows Kelly is coming. Kenneth is excited. Can we just not do this right now? He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge that he'd assumed my schedule was irrelevant. He just stepped toward the door, grabbing his briefcase. I'll see you tonight, he said. He walked out, the front door clicking shut with a finality that left me standing in the kitchen with a packed lunch and a completely empty Friday afternoon. I drove to the shop in a haze, the packed lunch sitting on the passenger seat like a reminder of a job I'd been fired from without being told. When I walked into the office, my manager, Dave, looked up from a clipboard. He was a guy who viewed the world in terms of inventory and shipping windows, and he didn't like it when the schedule shifted. You're in for the afternoon? Dave asked, glancing at the wall calendar. I thought you were heading out at noon for the kid. Plans changed, I said. I can work the full shift. Dave shrugged, not particularly bothered, though he did look a little suspicious. Fine by me. We've got that shipment of brake pads coming in at 2, so stay on the dock. I spent the next 6 hours moving boxes and arguing with a vendor about a mislabeled pallet of oil filters. It was a relief to be around things that stayed where I put them, but every time my phone buzzed, I felt a spike of anxiety. I didn't want to see a photo of Kenneth at the aquarium, or a text from Kelly thanking Terry for making things so easy. When I finally got home, the house was loud. Kenneth was in the living room, vibrating with excitement, recounting the giant squid and the tunnel of sharks. Terry was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water, looking like he'd successfully navigated a minefield. "He had a great time," Terry said, gesturing toward Kenneth. "Kelly said the aquarium was a hit. It was a good move, getting him over there for the weekend. It keeps the transition smooth." I leaned against the doorframe, my bag still on my shoulder. "I had the afternoon off, Terry," he sighed, that same exhausted sound from Tuesday. "Jamie, we already talked about this. You said you were done with the school stuff. I just took the lead." "I meant the paperwork," I said. "I didn't mean I wanted to be deleted from the weekend. I didn't delete you. I coordinated." Kelly was already planning the trip, and it was easier to just say yes than to start a whole debate about who was picking him up when the school is already expecting her. Easier for who? Terry set the glass down on the counter with a soft clink. "For everyone. You know how she gets if she feels like there's a struggle for control. If I just agree to her plan, Kenneth gets to go to the aquarium and nobody's screaming. I'm just trying to keep the peace so the kid doesn't feel the friction." I looked at him. He wasn't trying to be malicious. He genuinely believed that by bypassing me, he was protecting the family from a conflict he was too tired to manage. He treated my competence as a safety net he could rely on for the boring stuff, but treated my presence as a potential complication when it came to Kelly. "The friction is already here, Terry," I said. "You just moved it from the school office to this kitchen." "I don't see why this has to be a thing," he muttered, turning away to put the glass in the dishwasher. "I solved the portal problem. I got him to the trip. I handled the ex. What more do you want?" "I want to be asked," I said. "I don't care about the portal password or who pays the $10. I care that you think handling it means making decisions about my time without talking to me." Terry didn't answer. He just started scrubbing a pot, the sound of the sponge harsh against the metal. He wasn't apologizing, but he wasn't fighting either. He was just retreating into the labor of the kitchen, hoping that if he stayed busy enough, the conversation would just evaporate. I stood there for a moment, wanting to scream, wanting to demand a list of every arrangement he'd made in the last month. But I realized that was just more of the same, me trying to manage the system he was actively avoiding. I walked past him and went into the bedroom. I didn't slam the door, but I closed it firmly. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone. There was a notification from the school app. Another update. This time, it was a reminder about the Monday morning folder. I didn't open it. I just turned the phone face down on the nightstand and stayed in the silence. Monday morning felt like a hangover without the drinks. I woke up with a dull ache behind my eyes, the kind that comes from spending a whole weekend pretending you aren't thinking about the person sleeping next to you. I didn't look at Terry when I went into the kitchen. I just started the coffee, the machine hissing and spitting in the silence. Kenneth came sliding into the room in his socks, his Monday folder clutched in his hand. He was talking before he'd even hit the table. "Dad said I can start the advanced art club on Tuesdays," he said, dumping a neon green flyer onto the counter. "He said he already told Mrs. Gable it was okay and that he'd handle the rides." I stopped pouring the coffee. I looked at the flyer, then at Terry, who had just walked in, still buttoning his cuffs. "Advanced art club?" I asked. "Since when?" Terry didn't look at me. He was focused on his wrist. "Since last week. Kelly and I talked about it. She thought it would be good for his focus, and I agreed. I told her I'd take care of the transportation so she didn't have to worry about it during her clinic hours." I felt that same hot prickle from the school office. "You told her you would handle the rides." "I did," he said, finally looking up, His expression was that same flat, tired mask. I wanted her to see that I'm on top of things. She's been complaining that I'm too passive with the scheduling. I told her I had a handle on it. And by having a handle on it, do you mean you were planning to ask me to do it? Terry paused, his hand hovering over the coffee pot. I didn't say that. But you're usually the one who's more flexible with the afternoon shifts at the shop. I figured we could just work it out, like we always do. I didn't think. I just grabbed the neon green flyer and crumpled it into a ball, throwing it hard toward the trash can. It missed and bounced off the rim, rolling across the linoleum. I'm not your secret weapon, Terry, I snapped. My voice was too loud, too sharp for 7 a.m. Kenneth flinched, his eyes widening, and he slowly backed away toward the living room. Terry stared at the crumpled paper on the floor, then at me. Why are you screaming? It's a ride to a classroom. It's not a federal crime. It's not the ride, I said, my chest heaving. It's the fact that you go to Kelly and play the role of the superdad. The one who handles everything, while I'm the one actually driving the car. You're using me to buy points with your ex-wife. That is not what I'm doing, he said, though his voice lacked any real conviction. I'm trying to keep the peace. If she thinks I'm the one managing the logistics, she stays off my back, and the kid gets to do the art club. Everybody wins. I don't win, I said. I just get another Tuesday afternoon I have to carve out of my workday because you were too cowardly to tell her that we share the labor. Terry sighed. That long, draining sound that usually made me feel like the one being unreasonable. I just didn't think it was a big deal. I'll figure something else out. No, I said, and the word felt cold and precise. You told her you'd handle it. You promised her you'd be the one to do the transport. So you do it. All of it. Every Tuesday for the rest of the semester. Terry blinked. I have the regional audit meetings on Tuesdays, Jamie. You know that. I can't leave the credit union at 3. Then you should have told Kelly that, I said. Or you should have asked me if I could do it before you promised her you would. He opened his mouth to argue, to tell me I was being difficult, or that I was hurting Kenneth, but I didn't give him the space. I didn't want to hear the for the kid excuse. I had spent 4 years accepting that excuse as a reason to be invisible. I'm not doing the art club rides, I said. If you told her you've got a handle on it, then prove it. I picked up my bag and walked out the door without looking back. As I drove to the shop, I kept thinking about that crumpled green paper on the kitchen floor. I knew Terry would probably end up calling me at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, or he'd send a frantic text saying he was stuck in a meeting and needed a rescue. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and decided right then that I wasn't going to answer the phone. Tuesday arrived with a heavy, expectant silence. I spent the morning at the shop focusing on a messy inventory of brake rotors, trying not to look at the clock. By 2 o'clock, the countdown felt physical, a tightness in my chest that mirrored the way I'd been gripping the steering wheel all morning. I knew the regional audit meetings were grueling. Terry had spent the last 3 years treating them like a military operation, with locked doors and a strict no-interruption policy. At 2:42, my phone buzzed on the shipping desk. It was a text from Terry. Audit is running over. I can't get out. Please, just this once, can you grab Ken for art club? I'll make it up to you. I'm stuck. I stared at the screen. The old version of me, the one who preferred a quiet evening to a principled stand, wanted to swipe yes immediately. I could see the sequence. I'd leave work early, pick up Kenneth, and the tension in the house would evaporate. Terry would be grateful, the kid would be happy, and the world would return to its usual, tilted equilibrium. But I thought about the neon green flyer and the way Terry had used my flexibility as a currency to buy favor with Kelly. If I stepped in now, I wasn't just helping Kenneth. I was validating the idea that Terry could promise whatever he wanted to the world as long as I was there to absorb the cost. I didn't reply. I didn't send a lecture or a reminder about our conversation. I just turned the phone face down on the laminate surface and went back to the rotors. The afternoon passed in a blur of shipping manifests and loud diesel engines. I felt a flicker of guilt every time I thought of Kenneth waiting by the school door, but I reminded myself that Terry had a phone and Kelly was on the contact list. They were the biological parents. They were the primary contacts. They had the authority. Now, they had the responsibility. When I finally walked through the front door at 6, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Kenneth was in his room, the door shut, and Terry was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and his phone lying face up in front of him. He didn't look up when I came in. He looked gray, his shoulders slumped in a way that made him look 10 years older. "How was the audit?" I asked, setting my bag on the counter. Terry let out a short, dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Fine. Great. I got a commendation for the quarterly filing. And the art club?" He finally looked at me. There was no anger in his expression, just a profound, exhausted realization. Kelly had to leave her clinic early. She had to push back 2 appointments to get him. "I see. She wasn't happy, Jamie. She told me that if I'm going to play the part of the organized parent to make myself look better, I actually need to be organized. She said she's tired of me making promises that end up being her problem." I leaned against the counter, watching him. For the first time in 4 years, Terry wasn't delegating the fallout to me. He wasn't asking me to help him smooth things over with Kelly or suggesting we just move past it. He was sitting in the middle of the friction he had created, and he had no way to outsource it. "So what happens next Tuesday?" I asked. Terry rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know. I have to figure it out. I told her I'd call her tomorrow to coordinate a real plan, one that actually works." He didn't ask me for the password to the portal. He didn't ask if I could just help out next week. He just sat there in the silence of the kitchen, staring at the phone that had failed to rescue him. I walked past him and started the coffee, the familiar hiss of the machine filling the room. I didn't offer to help him plan. I just poured myself a cup and sat down at the table, waiting for him to figure out the rest.